Yo, my name is Machel Montano, and I'm here with Okayplayer. I think timing is everything, and I feel the convergence of happenings in my career and the trend of music worldwide, even the trend of music in within my culture. I feel things coming together and starting to work in harmony. I just achieved one of my greatest milestones, winning my 12th Road March title to become, the highest winner of Road March titles ever, breaking a 50-year record. That really gives me a sort of achievement and you know, um, sense of satisfaction that I can take a step back now and not work hard, but work smart and do something that I want to do. Similarly, I also feel inspired by seeing what is happening with reggaeton music and Bad Bunny on an international level. That is Caribbean culture, pushing through globally. And then the convergence of all the Caribbean genres, bouillon, bashment, soca, denry segment, jab. I feel like we all coming together to unite. And I feel with all these three things happening, I am being called to really, go into my bag, into my production and writing and creating and pioneering vibe. So I felt like telling my story would be important to all the young players, all the producers, all the writers, all the artists coming up, to give them a little history of what should inspire them to understand how a career of longevity, what it's really made of. This documentary is about legacy, so I want to encourage them to work with that in mind. But it's also about evolution, transformation, recreating yourself, which is what I'm constantly doing. And I feel like we're sitting in a time when it would be great to understand the experience and the tradition of the past, study a career like mine, but to also see how I'm embracing the future, embracing all the technology and all the talent, and really trying to make a global push for soca music and the genre of Caribbean culture.
And as the king of soca, what better person to tell the story, right?
I mean, the facts are in the experience. I've had those moments. I've been through most of the situations that anyone coming up in this business would be in, and I'm still here and doing okay. So I think that's a good blueprint for those who really want to make a massive impact. I think it was about thinking about the big picture and looking at, really uniting with everything around me, using what was in front of me to propel us as a region. I really believe Caribbean culture outside of reggae music and now reggaeton, has something to offer in the upcoming days, really soon, especially just soca music, the different versions of soca music, and there's so many variations of it. So I just felt like, I would play a role, and I would definitely want to, help those around me, work with them, and try to achieve this. So in order to in order to make that shift, I had to move away from being someone that everybody would compete against, to someone who everybody would want to work with and embrace. My knowledge and my experience and my ideas are so crazy. But I was also just getting into new management. I prayed for a young manager who was vibrant, who understand my level of spirituality, and wanted to really try to start to create a different type of soca. You know, I have a saying that I've read that says, "What got you here wouldn't get you there." So in my days when soca wasn't popular, we had to use, Machel being a sex symbol, being a whiner boy, being a girl's man to attract younger people to the music. Now I think, our music has become such a uniting force of bringing people together. And I think with the right messages in soca, we could solve some of the wars in the world. We could encourage people to learn how to live side by side and learn how to bring races together and cultures together. So I just felt like it was a time to shift my purpose or shift my intentions, both musically and as a human being, and working with the right people. So Road March, which started in the 1930s, maybe as early as 1930, was that song during carnival time that would become the most popular song of the carnival. The song that everybody would want to sing. Back in those days, the musicians would walk these roads and walk the streets playing guitars and drums in the streets with the masqueraders. So, they'll say you walk a mile and a half and Lay, but the band will be playing the music and the masqueraders will be there. And whatever song people wanted to hear most frequently would be, titled the Road March. Of course, over the years, Carnival was judged at competition points and on big stages. And people would use the most popular song as a song for them to cross the stage in front of the judges because it would give them the most energy. It would have the entire crowd singing along or doing dance routines. Songs like Palance, songs like Jambi, songs like, Footsteps. And over the years, this is what it became, the most popular song or the most popular song crossing the stage. I have, started winning road marches. When I wanted to become really popular, I said, I have to win a road march. What am I going to write about? And I wrote about the big truck because it was the most popular thing in the streets. And that was my first road march in 1997. Since then, you always want to chase this feeling because that's the song that brings all the people in the nation together. They all want to sing it. They all agree that this is the song. That there is no other feeling like your whole country loving your song. So, then became the hunt for Road March, the quest to try to keep winning them and getting that euphoric feeling. In 2015, I had one of my biggest road marches, which was Like a Boss. And I was just coming off of winning in 2014 with Ministry of Road. And I worked with the same writer trying to write another Power Soca song, which didn't win. But here we had a medium tempo song that took off on its own and became the most popular song. So it's sometimes not something you could plan, but it happens based on public perception and what they love. Well, people tend to say that Road March is a competition. Some people try to label it as a competition, but it's not really a competition. It's really an honor. People give you this honor by naturally, loving your song or gravitating towards your song. Now, you can do things to encourage them, like the more you perform every night before Carnival, Monday and Tuesday, if you really make them love the song more, they lean in your direction. But it's definitely something that you can't manipulate or dictate. You have to sit there and let the people really accept it. And you want to create that song for people to give you that honor. There was a definite point when I decided to bring what I call theater into performing. I was always a big Michael Jackson fan, and I always grew up watching Guns N' Roses with the lasers and the smoke and lighting. So I was always excited by those things and technology and music. But in my quest to make soca more loved on a global level or even on a local level, I thought there were things that I needed to do to revolutionize the audience artist experience. And I remember in 2003 is Carnival, that album. I had an album called The Ecstatic Circus. And you would see, we dressed up like I was a Bobo Dread. This guy was a clown. Nappy was the ringmaster. The entire band, the guitarist learned to play on stilts that year. So he would walk on stilts and play guitar. And I also employed 4 dancing girls. I would build scaffolding on the sides of the stage and have them one here, call them the Powerpuff Girls. They would basically be, dancing really, really sexy and doing tricks. And that was just to bring a little more theater. I eventually evolved to working with big masquerade producers, people like Peter Minshall, and using big puppets on stage. But I just felt like we had to have a level of global attraction. And I felt like putting theater would definitely be something that would add a twist. Competed in competitions like the Soca Monarch, which was the competition for the best soca performer of the year, would have the biggest audience. I would have people flying in, diving out of the sky, parachuting onto the stage. One year I hired the Rocket Man to fly out of the stadium, the same Rocket Man used by Michael Jackson. One year I had people in Vegas to make me fall from the sky on cables. I would just do everything crazy. Even one year I risked my life by putting on the ring that Pink had on to fly over the stadium like Superman. And I had one rehearsal, one 20-minute rehearsal. Anything could have gone wrong. But I was always willing to push the limits to bring something to the audience that they had never seen. If they could picture us on a global scale doing global things, maybe that would make us, a little closer to the global goal. Well, listen, you can't be forever young. That's just a song. And this physical body is like a plant. It grows up, it bears fruit, but then it starts to wither. Doing all those crazy things, jumping off of speakers, going into splits, climbing up on trucks, dancing, whining. The knees start getting older. The hips start getting painful. The back, the neck. So you have to kind of, I like to say, grow old gracefully. And you have to be smart. So you have to adjust your music. Start doing groovy songs like Fast Wine. Start doing One More Time. Start doing music that you could have the same impact spiritually or emotionally with people, but not the same impact physically on the body. And I've had my fair share of nicks and knacks. Let's just call it that.
But I think it was worth it. Can we say it was worth it?
Oh, for sure. When you go hard or you go home. And I don't regret anything that I've done in my life, even the craziest stunts. I'm what you call a stunt performer. When you see me on a big truck hanging off, whining on Carnival Monday and Tuesday, that's risking your life. But we say we risk it for the biscuit. Growing alongside all the artists that I have grown alongside has been the best part of my journey. And I don't think anybody has had the experience that I have had, because I grew up next to the Mighty Sparrow, Lord Kitchener, and then I had to experience Super Blue throwing the mic, becoming a spiritual Baptist soca singer. I experienced David Rudder, who was feeding off of the Fela Kuti era, singing Brazilian soca music. And then I came up with my sidekicks for people like Bunji Garlin, who was doing raga soca, Destra, who was just like the best vocalist ever. I got to see that and to grow with them and compete with them and be inspired by them. I also grew up, being on tour with people like Arrow, who sang Hot Hot Hot. I saw the birth of Kevin Little, and he performed on stage with me. Rupee, I saw Rupee come to life. Alison Hines and Crossfire, Square One and Crossfire, they actually pushed me to become the star that I am today, because in 1996, things wasn't going right for me. I was signed to Delicious Vinyl in 1995. I thought I was going to become a worldwide hit. It didn't happen. I came back home, and there was Alison Hines with songs like Ragamuffin, and there was like Crossfire with, Pump Me Up. And I was like so impressed with this music that it really kicked me into overdrive to want to be that big and have music like that. And I produced my 1997 album called Big Truck, which won me my first road march. I had about 5 hits on there. I sampled the Lord Kitchener, Give Me the Thing, to do a song called Whiner Boy. Pretty Girl was a big hit that I was inspired by Papa San, Girls, Girls Everywhere I Go. If you listen to that, I sampled Harry Belafonte, Pretty, 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 Pretty Dolly. So I was doing a lot of sampling and a lot of, feeding off of other things to make myself a household name. And from 1997, I never looked back. So it was an absolute honor to grow next to these people. I still enjoying that pleasure, growing up with people like Young Brother, Lady Lava, and Nyla Blackman, the whole Grenadian contingent, people like Muddy, Vaughn, Lil Kerry, Wasways, people from St. Vincent like Skinny Fabulous, Problem Child. I could just keep going on and on naming all these islands, because I have all these inspirations. And I just feel like there is a blessing to have such a long scope for me and to still be relevant and still mean something and have them mean something to me. I love sampling. There's nothing new under the sun. You could only rearrange. Music is something that many times you don't even know when somebody's sampling something, they hide it. These samples help us to take energies from a past time and put it into a new time, mix it with something new. That is my whole philosophy. So there were a lot of soca songs that we sampled illegally, and you know, we had to go back in retrospect and kind of, you know, fix those scenarios. But a lot of the music coming up was inspired by things that already existed, and I feel like people need to understand the art of sampling. There's a classy way to do it. There's a genius way to do it. People like Kanye West who know just how to put samples into there. A lot of the top producers, you know, No ID, who would speed up things and do it different ways. I learned sampling from Teddy Riley using you know, his little Casio FZ1, and I emulated that and bought all those equipment just to be like him. You know, even the Bad Boy era, the hit makers, you know, going back into the Mary J. Blige records and using Curtis Mayfield and using all those, you know, Biggie Smalls samples. I just think that is a grocery for me. That is fun. I love that, and I live for that. And it is my goal and my dream. I was one of the first persons in soca music who started sampling songs. You know, if you listen to that 1997 album, I even used the technique of the Jamaican dancehall rhythm with the big truck. The big truck, there was a road march, big truck, and I had a flip side called Party Crowded that was the same beat, but two different songs. And I was the one really advocating for us to do songs, you know, on the same rhythm in soca. I had to encourage a lot of people. Now today it's happening. So I'm just saying that we haven't really gone deep into sampling in soca music, and we have such a vast amount of songs that we can sample. I have seen it happen over the years, and I would love to see more of that, and I intend to do a lot more sampling. Wow, some of my favorite soca rhythms of all time. Wow, you're gonna put me to task right there. You're gonna make me jump into my crate. I don't have to think about that.
Digging the mental crates a little bit.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. I drawing a blank. But I mean, I I love soca rhythms, and I believe in soca rhythms because it helps the artists who might not be, you know, recognized, gives them a space to live and for things to happen. The Antilles rhythm by Precision Productions, which I had Vibescar done. Kerwin had Bacchanalis on it. Even Irfan Alves, who was unknown at that time, was writing for somebody else, and he ended up having a song called In Your Eyes, and that helped launch his career. So, you know, that was a pretty good rhythm. And over the years, there have been many, you know, I can't really put my finger on them because, again, in my world, I'll hardly be looking at it and studying it that hard. I'll either be partying to it or I'll be trying to outdo it. So, you know, but that was some of the ones that I really remember and love, you know. The difference between soca and calypso, well, calypso came first. Calypso is one of the earliest musics coming out of the Caribbean. It's derived from African tradition, the tradition of the griot. It's about, you know, taking music and expressing what was happening in your communities musically. It was informing the people. The Calypsonian was always what we call the newspaper to music. He would sing about what was happening politically. He would sing about gossip with neighbors and relationships, what was happening in the hood, on the ground, as they say. And it was basically seen as what we call social commentary, very serious music. Eventually, there were versions of it that had dancing and a lot of dancing. Of course, people like Harry Belafonte took theater to it and put it on a global scale. And Calypso became really famous worldwide. There were a lot of people looking at Calypso. Some of the big band music by Harry Belafonte and these guys was inspired by Calypso. But at some point, Calypso became the music of carnival and partying and drinking and dancing in the streets. And you had certain Calypsonians wanting to have a spiritual experience with music. Rash Shorty I, who we consider to be the creator of soca, was one of the people who were experimenting, but he really coined the phrase because that was a part of the soul revolution in the United States, the Black Power movement, and he really wanted to put the soul back into the art of Calypso. and he wanted to have some level of spirituality. He went through a moment of, introduction into East Indian culture, mantras and meditation and yoga, and they taught him things like Om Shanti, and he started putting that into the calypso beat. He blended the Indian instruments into the African instruments, because when he tried to mix the two, the Indian community wasn't happy, the African community wasn't happy. So he took the beat from the dolak, going doom doom, doom doom, that drum, and he put it on the bass, doom doom, doom doom. He took the triangle, the dantal, ticking, 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 and he put it on the hi-hats, and he hit it and made this music that was basically Afro-Indo unification. And this music made people dance. This music made people sing. So soca was less about lyrics and social commentary, and more about dancing, and more about vibrations, and more about love and unity. So it was a little more festive. And it took off, and it became a party music. It became the soundtrack for Carnival. Well, many times good songs slip through the cracks. And I've had quite a few. I've had songs that mean a lot to me. I go really hard into the spiritual aspect of it, but then they come out during Carnival time when everybody just wants to jump and wave and whine and have a good time. They don't want to tax their brain with spirituality or vibrations. So, a piece of work that I did that I hold very dearly to my heart, and if I had to show you something that summed what Machel Montano was about, would be that video and song that I have called On My Way. And I filmed that video in front of the pyramids on my 40th birthday. And I went to Egypt just to be in front of the pyramids. It was a song produced by Smitty and Star Blue. It was a song that people like Tano, who's one of the top producers, he worked on that. There's a stream of young producers across the Caribbean who worked on this experimental beat and this experimental song. And I just felt like, yeah, On My Way to You, it was the fact that I was trying to be as great as the mighty sparrow, or my son was trying to be as great as me, or the pyramids, was reflective of the Trinity Hills in Trinidad when they took us from Africa and brought us to the Caribbean. It was this On My Way to You, wanting to go back to my roots, in Africa, wanting to return to the motherland. There was just this feeling of a cyclic nature. And the song says, anywhere soca music is, I will be there. And that's my line, that's to me, anywhere soca music is, you'll find Machel Montano somewhere in there mentioned. And I'm On My Way to You, and I just love that song, but it wasn't a big hit. The fans love it, people love to hear it, but it's very rare to hear it on radio. I mean, when you ask me songs like that, my scope is so wide. Like, Everyday People, Arrested Development, Q-Tip, Vibrant Thing. So much of Biggie, small songs. I have so much, like, okay, OPP, you done with OPP, Yeah, You Know Me. Those songs were so big in Trinidad at that point in time that, we would find a way to resonate with that. But just listen to even recently people like Wyclef Jean, who's a Haitian, with the production on the things that they did with Lauryn Hill and the Fugees album, Salam Remy, who is my friend, who produced on that. I just love what Caribbean people did with hip hop music and what role they played, and I always remember doing it while LL Cool J. I could go to the deep songs, but I also like the songs that make you dance. I like when hip hop records have a character or a sample, dang, 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 and it's just drums. But you can feel this deep sense of, like Ready or Not, the keys in there. You feel this grandeur, you feel it cutting deeper than just a rap. This is actually something that waking up your soul. So I mean, it would be unfair to me to pick out certain songs because I'll forget. Even "Work, Work, Work" by Rihanna, I can feel the depth. I can feel the spirituality in that. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, Kanye, Jay, Kendrick, Drake, they all have things that touch me really deep. I can remember um, I'll Take Care of You, listening to that on a boat in the Caribbean, just coming back from down the islands and just feeling the wind and understanding that, yeah, this is hip hop, but yet I'm here in soca. I like when I hear those relationships and I can relate to things like that. Well, you call it intersections. The Caribbean is a whole intersection. Trinidad culture was based on all the islands that came to Trinidad and colonized Trinidad. Um, I love, I love the elbows. That's what I call the intersections. So I listen to Chateaubriand and I listen to where I hear the French Caribbean and the Spanish Caribbean connecting. Reggaeton music that is like reggae music, dancehall, but it's inspired by Calypso and Soca. I love anywhere that unity is happening, and I gravitate towards that a lot. When I travel to Japan or I go to India and Africa, I could recognize our beats that maybe originated there and came with people when we brought them to the Caribbean, or stuff that we did that went over there and inspired them. I mean, my big friends like Timaya and Burna Boy and Pato Rankin, they were all admiring dancehall music, and taking that dancehall music and mixing it into their Afro beats. So I just love it when we truly love in each other's things. We love to celebrate our uniqueness and celebrate our flags and defend our nation. If you Grenadian or you Vincentian, we want to say, oh, my food is the best, or Trinidad is curry chicken, or no, it's chicken curry in Guyana. And we have all these arguments, but I love to bask in the similarities and laugh about, we trying to own something that we both share. And we both have our versions. I find it to be much more funny. I find it to be much more exciting when we celebrate our similarities rather than our differences. You heard me freestyle a little
No,
bit.
I heard that you can.
I mean, well, my freestyling is like, coming from understanding what we call extempo music. I like extempo. Extempo is like freestyle. Freestyle is not my thing. I'm really like the person who like to plan, but I could freestyle any day. I sure you didn't know. My name is Machel Montano. I sing soca, but started with Calypso. That's something I sure you didn't know. I'll say this and I'll say it here. Okayplayer, you were very there. I love your vibes and I love your style. I hope I come back here for some while. For a while, But it's like I would shoot things off and I would freestyle on rhythms when I want to. But I really like to concentrate on writing good songs, and getting the messages out there. I think for those who freestyle in hip hop and freestyle in dancehall, that's their passion and that's their art. I could do it if I'm put in this situation. I would try my best, but it's fun to just be like that.
Just want to write it down, make sure it's how you want it to be.
I like structure. I like structure. I love structure.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But hey, don't get me wrong. I could come off the dome with the right rhythm. If you give me the right rhythm, I could come off the dome any second. Trust me. My Calypso Mount Rushmore will have, I mean, and this could be controversial, but I consider this the Godhead. The Roaring Lion. Nettie, Nettie, give me the thing that you got in your belly. He's a controversial character in Calypso, but I think I would consider him the Godhead. Then I would have the Mighty Sparrow, the king of Calypso. Lord Kitchener, the Grand Master, because he was the king of the road and he was the king of the pan songs. And then I would put Calypso Rose up there because she was a woman who held her own, a road march queen. She was a pioneer. She took our music globally. So I would put them up there. And I would even slip in David Rudder, you know, who really revolutionized um, not just calypso but soca music. Although he branded his music as calypso, what he really showed me in a time that we were all trying to be like top 40 bands and play all the hit songs was how to make your own albums, have your own songs, and be different. So he would be there. Soca, Mount Rushmore. You mean besides me? Am I on there or am I not on there? Oh, come on. Machel Montano, Bungie Garlin, Alison Hines. You see, you have to split it into generations too, you know, because we have a lot of great youngsters like Kes and Voice, but I would consider them to be after the first set. You know, I would still put Destra up there with Alison Hines. I think she has done, you know, definitely things that are different. But yeah, um, Skinny Fabulous will be there. So G. Then we need to have a different mountain for people like Burning Flames. You know, they need to be there. Arrow needs to be there. I could keep making these mountains, a whole mountain range, the Himalayas of soca artists. But that would be my Mount Rushmore. Yo, it's your boy Double M, the Monk Monte Machel Montano, and I just tapped him with Okayplayer. Okay.